Well, good evening, everyone, and it's time that we get to our final Bible study on the topic of Daniel. We have gotten up through chapter 11, nearly up to verse 40. So we need to get started, and that way we can finish chapter 11 and then also chapter 12. First thing I'd like to do is take a little digression. I have here, let me pull it up to share on the screen. This is from our booklet, The Middle Eastern Bible Prophecy, or the Middle Eastern Prophecy. And here we have on page 61, we have a question that is posed. Why the time gap in Daniel's prophecy between the ancient world and the world of today, a period of at least 2,000 years, with only sparse and cursory details of events in between? So in other words, it's a good question to ponder, because we have followed these power bases from the time of Daniel. Babylonian Empire, he lived on then into the early part of the Medo-Persian Empire. But he was given a vision, as we have seen, chapters 7, 8, and then in particular chapter 11, where he followed the breakup then of Medo-Persia, followed by Greece, Alexander's kingdom broken into 4 parts, settling out to these 2 power bases, one up north in Syria, one down south in Egypt. And we followed that for a long time, and last time we looked quite a bit at the in the 160s BC, the time of Antiochus IV, or Antiochus Epiphanes, and what he did at the Holy Land, the desecration of the temple, and many other factors involved there. Then we skip over a vast period of time, and we suddenly find that we're looking at prophecies that are for specifically the time of the end. So why this lengthy gap? Well, to continue in this paragraph, it says the answer is simple. For almost 2,000 years, there was no Jewish state, Jewish nation in the Middle East. The restoration of the Jewish state in 1948 has made the kings of the north and south relevant again to impacting the Jewish people in the Holy Land. Moving on down to, let's go down to the next page, and it mentions, top of page 62, again, the Middle Eastern Bible Prophecy. It says in the highlighted part, but this prophesied event could not have taken place without the physical restoration of Judah, now named Israel. That's the name of the Jewish state. Country is Israel, capital Jerusalem, populated mainly by Jews, continuing to some extent in the Holy Land before the end of the age. So then it mentions Zechariah 14. So let's go over to Zechariah 14 and look at this prophecy, because this is one place that tells us that there had to be a restoration of a Jewish state. In Zechariah 14, verse 2 actually begins, and it says, "For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, the women ravished, and half the city shall go forth into captivity, and the rest of the people shall not be cut off from the city." Now I'm reading from the King James here this evening, and we'll use this most of the time for the Bible study tonight. Verse 3 says, then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations as when he fought in the day of battle. So kind of a sweeping statement of all the many times when God has gone to battle for his people. And this time it involves, verse 4, the feet of Jesus Christ standing on the Mount of Olives. And the mount, it says, cleaves in 2, and mentions a great valley And then verse 5, and you shall flee to the valley of the mountains. The end of verse 5, and the Lord my God shall come, and all the saints with you. Now that's very important, because that tells us that the first resurrection has taken place. The seventh trumpet plague that is mentioned in the book of Revelation announces the fact that the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our God and of his Christ, and he'll reign forever and ever. But a lot of things happen. Physical Israel is released from captivity. As Paul wrote, in a moment, in a twinkling of an eye, the last trump, the dead in Christ, and those still alive will be born of spirit. And so this narrows it down to the very end, when Jesus returns and the saints are with him. Now let's go back to Revelation. I'm going to stop sharing this on the screen, and let's go back. I said Revelation, sorry. Let's go back to Daniel 11. And again, we saw last time, for instance, at the end of verse 35, it says, even to the time of the end, for it is yet for a time appointed. And then also we read, or we will pick it up here in verse 40, and at the time of the end. And of course, chapter 12 that we'll look at, we have a resurrection taking place and some being born to glory, and others coming up in other resurrections at another time. So it's the very end of the time. So let's pick it up here, verse 40. The time of the end shall the king of the south. Now, pause there. In chapter 11, we followed it. I told you from the beginning to keep your eye on the ball. Just ask the question continually, who controls the Holy Land? A lot of the time, King of the North controls it, but then it shifts, and the King of the South has control. But as we get to this point, we find the King of the North has the upper hand. Now, if I just look back up to verse 36, it says, and the king shall do according to his will. And the verses above had been following the King of the North. We should add, and the booklet, the Middle Eastern Bible Prophecy, points out that in 65 BC, so 65 before Christ, Rome became such a power that it completely overran and conquered the area that had been reigned from Antioch and Syria and some of those areas. So Rome now is the dominant Mediterranean power, and by taking over Syria, they control all the way across Mesopotamia. So instead of having the northern power base in Syria, it is moved. It is moved and is over in the area of Rome. We should notice that, or should comment that in history, it also moved again. Later, instead of in Italy, we find it moving up into Central Europe. That's where it was in the days of Charlemagne and Otto the Great, the Habsburgs, Napoleon, the Mussolini, Hitler axis, and we look for it one last time, the final house of Satan, the final beast. We expect it to be centered there in Europe, but in an agreement with a church-state agreement with the Church of Rome. So when we say King of the North now, it has shifted. It's still north, but it's over in Rome. Verse 40 again. Shall the king of the south push at him? Now, the New King James says, at the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him. That gives us something to pause on as well, because once upon a time, all we could see was oil. It's a matter that in the earlier decades of the 20th century, oil was found. They were found to be just unbelievable reserves, and there still are. And yet there are great reserves in Russia and in the US and in various places around the world. But some of us are old enough to remember when, I think it was around 1973, 74, we had a new acronym that came on the world scene called OPEC, the oil producing and exporting countries. OPEC became a confederation of the oil countries. And they began realizing we have some clout, we have some political power if we then threaten to or start tightening down on the spigot, cutting off the oil. Well, oil is fuels the engine of the world's economies. And so we remember, at least as a child, I remember 20-something cent a gallon gasoline. And I think at the time that this took place, we still only had 40-some cent a gallon gasoline. And all of a sudden, it takes off and it passed $1, and the rest is history. So we looked at this, the King of the South shall push at him, and we could only for a while see the specter of oil. We also, as time has gone on, it was further into the 1970s, we began to have events that were hijackings of airplanes, airliners. Perhaps one of the most famous one that we remember was the taking of the, I believe it was an El Al Israeli airliner that was taken control of by terrorists, and it was taken to the capital of Uganda, down towards Central Africa. The ruler there was Idi Amin, and you may remember there was a book and a movie came out titled Raid on Entebbe. So the airliner, mainly with Jews on board, but other national citizens, and it was taken to Entebbe, Uganda, and the Jewish commandos came in, landed at night, freed the people, killed the hostages. I believe there was one casualty, actually one death, and that was a brother of the man who is currently the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. His brother Yoni was killed in that raid. But we then had not just oil, but we had the beginnings of terrorism that has just by increments gone up and up and up and up, leading to the date we will always remember, 9/11, 2001, the attack on the Twin Towers in New York City and in other places. So we have the possibility of terrorism. It continues. Sadly, it's alive and well. Satan the devil is the great terrorist, and it's still around. But we have other considerations. Just looking at this word attack or push, how will the King of the South push toward the north to elicit such a response where the King of the North comes through and totally runs over the territories controlled by the King of the South? Well, we have powers in the Middle East that continue to, I should say, unfriendly powers that continue working on nuclear weapons as well as their missile technology. It wouldn't take but two or three, well, it wouldn't take even but one missile that is sent off with a powerful enough weapon to do great devastation to one of the capitals of Europe, or maybe a few capitals at the same time, to bring about a response beyond anything I can imagine, where Europe would come together and come and just run through. So we could also throw into the mix the possibility of key assassinations. If you have some of the leaders of Europe who are assassinated, that too could bring about. It has happened before. That's how World War I started. The terrorist that killed the Austrian Archduke, and just kind of the igniting spark that led to World War One. Well, let's continue here then. We're in verse 40. King of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind. Now, a whirlwind, tornado, typhoon, hurricane, these are in the air. And he would come with great power in the air and with chariots. So again, Daniel is being given this vision. He's seeing things he's having to write down in terms that made sense to him at that time. Chariots and with horsemen, so cavalry, and then the foot soldiers, and with many ships, so a great navy. And he, that's the king of the north, shall enter into the countries and pass over and overflow and pass over. But notice verse 41, he shall enter also into the glorious land. Glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand. Even Edom and Moab and the chief of the children of Ammon. He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. All right, this leads to another pause. We have a gathering of peoples here. Let me put this back up on the screen. This is the Middle Eastern Bible prophecy, but let me go, let's see, page 70. Let me see if I can go here. This is faster. All right. Page 70 in the Middle Eastern Bible Prophecy booklet, we have a box, and it says the prophecy of an Arab confederation. And it says Psalm 83 contains an intriguing prophecy of many Middle Eastern nations. Well, it goes down and actually quotes a lot of what I really want to focus on. So I think instead of turning to it in the Bible, I'll just read it here. So in this next paragraph, it begins in verse 3, that's Psalm 83, verse 3 through verse 8. They, so here is a grouping of people he's going to describe. They've taken crafty counsel against your people. So the thrust of the psalm is an address, at least this part, a statement to God. They've taken your people and consulted together against your sheltered ones. And so our understanding has been there are forces that move against physical Israel and their descendants, and spiritual Israel, the church, that may at that time be protected, however God decides to do that. They have said, come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be remembered no more. So this is the tie that binds. There is a most intense hatred of Israel, the descendants of Abraham, and those who have received the promises and the blessings that were promised to Abraham. They have consulted together with one consent. They form a confederacy against you. And so actually it's not just Israel. They do not want or accept the reign of God over them. Then it says the 10th of Edom. So here's the beginning of this grouping of people. 10th of Edom, Edom or Esau. Sometimes the Bible refers to the land of Idumea, and that's the land of Edom. Esau was the brother of Jacob, and he became a great enemy of Jacob. And the Ishmaelites. Ishmael, as you remember, the story of Abraham was Sarah's handmaid Hagar, and Ishmael And yet the dominant promises were not to go through Ishmael. They would go through the one that would come later named Isaac. Moab. Moab, remember Lot, nephew of Abraham, his two daughters, and you had Moab and Ammon, those peoples that came from there. Moab and the Hagrites, thought to be other descendants of Hagar. Gebal, Ammon, Amalek, Philistia with the inhabitants of Tyre. Assyria also. So interestingly here, Assyria, the ones that can be traced across to the north and the west, settling in the lands of around Germany today. Assyria also has joined with them, and they have helped the children of Lot. Well, after that it mentions these biblical names and peoples. Says here Edom includes Palestinians and some of the Turks. Ishmaelites, descendants of Ishmael, are scattered through various Arab countries. Moab, the area of central Jordan. The Hagrites refer to other descendants of Hagar, mother of Ishmael. Gebal, meaning mountain, is commonly equated with the Phoenician city of Byblos, modern Jubal in Lebanon. Ammon refers to northern Jordan around Amman. The capital, the name of the capital comes from Amman. Amalek appears to refer to a branch of Edomite Palestinians. Philistia is the area around what is today known as the Gaza Strip. And then anciently, Tyre was a major city-state in southern Lebanon along the Mediterranean coast. And then the Assyria ethnically appears to refer to the inhabitants of Central Europe. So, children of Lot, Moab and Ammon, modern-day Jordan. So we have this gathering of people, and I think I can take this one down again. We have this gathering of people. The common denominator is we want to destroy the children of Israel, and much more than the little nation called Israel. And so that's what he's talking about here in verses 41 and 42 as the king of the north comes sweeping in based upon whatever this push was and totally runs over, takes control of the various peoples that are confederate together against Israel and that strike at, attack, or push at the king of the north. Well, let's continue in verse 43. But he, it's again king of the north, shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver and over all the precious things of Egypt. You will remember that in World War I, there were a lot of battles down in the Middle East. In fact, British General Allenby led forces that freed what was called then Palestine. The Middle East was a factor in World War II. We had further over Egypt and on to the west of there, the countries, Tunisia and whatnot. We had a lot of battles there, with some of the early battles being won by the Germans under the leadership of the Desert Fox, Rommel. And then we had Montgomery, and then America's General Patton came on a little later, and the Allied forces were able to prevail in time. So here at the time of the end, it seems the Middle East, being a reservoir of oil and great wealth, seems to always come into play. So the treasures of gold and silver and over the precious things of Egypt, the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. Verse 44, but tidings out of the east and out of the north. All right, let's pause right there just for a moment. It's not our thrust to go to the book of Revelation, but in the book of Revelation there are trumpet plagues. Of course, there first are seals, 7 seals. The 7th seal unfolds and becomes 7 trumpet plagues. The seventh trumpet plague announces the return of Christ, and in his presence, 7 bowls of judgment are poured out. But when the trumpet plagues come along, you have tremendous punishment being poured out upon the human family, as God himself is taking a hand over the affairs of the earth before mankind destroys itself. There's one place in Revelation it says, woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth. 3 woes. Those coincide with trumpets 5, 6, and 7. The 5th trumpet, you see, we need to realize we've been following King of the North, King of the South. We need to realize there's another power. There's another power to the east. Bible prophecy calls this group to the east the men of the east. The men of the east. And it talks about in Revelation the drying up the Euphrates and this army of vast numbers beyond anything we can imagine. Numbers that could only come from Asia, where you have Russia, but you have China and you have India. You have many other countries with tremendous populations. Who else could field an army of 200 million soldiers? So remember that we have the men of the east. So here in verse 44, the king of the north has come and totally overrun the king of the south. They control it all. But there's this other power, and he gets tidings. King of the north makes the same mistake that has been made in history. Napoleon had everything going his way, but he had to strike against Russia. And the Russian winter devastated his army, and it led to his downfall. It was a factor. Hitler had everything going his way. He even had a non-aggression pact with the Russians, the Soviets, as they were called by that time. He couldn't stand it. He attacked Russia, and once again underestimated the Russian winter and the effect that it has on soldiers on the ground. It'll happen again. It will happen again. There will be something that concerns the beast of Revelation, who is also the king of the north, who has just overtaken the Middle East. But he'll be troubled by the men of the east, and he will turn and attack. So verse 44, tidings of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly to make a way. Verse 45, and he, again, king of the north, European beast power, shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. And margin says the goodly holy mountain. These words refer to Jerusalem sitting there on the top of the central Judean mountain chain. You have other prophecies that could be tied in. You have a man of sin, a son of perdition. He is called in 2 Thessalonians 2, who moves a religious headquarters there and actually elicits worship as if he's a god. So you have a presence there in the Holy Land. Between the seas and the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. Now there are plenty of prophecies that tell us. I'll just refer you to right at the end of Revelation 19. Revelation 19 verses 19 and 20. And it says the beast and the false prophet. So this dynamic duo of the end time beast will be cast into the fire, the lake of fire, the burning with fire and brimstone. They will be destroyed at the time of the end. All right. Other scriptures that could be tied in there, we've already referred to Matthew 24:15, where Jesus said, when you see the abomination that makes desolate in the holy place, spoken of by Daniel the prophet. So that speaks of this time when a false religious power will make Jerusalem his center of operations. Well, let's keep going now. I think we are in a good place here to just keep on into chapter 12. Chapter 12, again, I mentioned the Bible study before. Chapters 10, 11, 12 are one package. Chapter 10 told of how Daniel beseeched God. He's well up in years. He wants to know, as he realizes the 70 years of Babylonian captivity are nearing the end, he wants to hear that his people are going to go back. We had the story of how the angel came to give him the prophecy we know as chapter 11 and 12, but he was held up. There was spiritual warfare taking place, and he was held up for 3 weeks. Then the angel got through with the help of Michael the archangel, who came to do battle. And then we have chapter 11 and now chapter 12. So it's just a continuation. And what we read of in the end of chapter 45 leads us right up to the return of Jesus Christ. Chapter 12, at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince who stands for the children of your people. And there's one place in the Bible where the word archangel appears, and it's in the little book of Jude. And it refers to Michael the archangel. So this is one of the most powerful angels that God has. He is the one, as it says, the great prince who stands for the children of your people. It seems that God sends him to do battle for the children of Israel, as he has many times. He will at the time of the end. We also read in Revelation of a time when there will again be war in heaven. So it's something that is going to take place again. And then he said there'll be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. So this time, in the Olivet prophecy, Jesus referred to Matthew 24, verse 22, 21, 22, a time of a great tribulation. And the danger of totally exterminating human life. Jeremiah 30, verse 7, he talked about the time of Jacob's trouble. And so these phrases tell us the world has had awful times. And we're going through some pretty awful times right now as you look around the world. But there's a time coming that today's troubling events will pale into insignificance whenever these come to pass. Continuing, time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time, your people shall be delivered. Everyone that shall be found written in the book. And here we have a reference to what has to refer to the book of life. And that book of life, God has been writing names in. Over and over, names are written there. The saints, the men and women of God who have fought the good fight and have a crown of life, as the Apostle Paul said. He said, I know there's a crown laid up for me. And so, yet it says, verse 2, and many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth. Now, sleep is a beautiful metaphor the Bible uses for death. It doesn't say that everyone comes up in a resurrection when Christ returns. Those whose names are written in the book will arise. Others will wait, as Revelation 20 makes it clear. The saints live and reign with Christ 1,000 years. He says this is the first resurrection, but it also says the rest of the dead There are times after the 1,000 years, and that's where Revelation 20 verses 11, 12, 13 talk about this throne and the graves being opened, and all standing there, small and great, before God. So, continuing, many shall arise, shall awake, some to everlasting life. So that's the first resurrection. That's the term that is used in Revelation 20. This is the first resurrection. And some to shame and everlasting contempt. So some are going to have a time of judgment. Let me see how it is worded here in the New King James. Some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. So very similar. And it is a matter that Revelation 20, we have to go there for the rest of the story as far as the framework we're given. But after the 1,000 years, the graves will be opened and people will stand there for judgment. Because it says the books will be opened. Books, Biblia, we have our word Bible from the Greek Biblia. The books will be opened. They're judged from the things written in the books. Well, continuing. Verse 3, they, that be wise, shall shine as the brightness of the firmament. So this speaks of resurrection to eternal life for many. And they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. So this is a birth into the family of God. It is eternal life. It is putting on the spirit body that Paul referred to in the resurrection chapter. But in verse 4, but you, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. And if those aren't a couple of phrases that describe our day, I don't know what is. Until COVID-19 came along, we took for granted the fact that we could go buy a plane ticket, get on a plane ticket, and go see family in Dallas, or we could get on a plane and go on a trip to Paris, France, or we could go to Sydney, Australia, or Beijing, or Mumbai. We took for granted. Get on a plane, probably within 24 hours, be just about anywhere across the face of this earth. And we have that suspended right now. It can be done, but it's not as easy. Knowledge increased. Some of us remember how Mr. Armstrong used to talk about how the world had changed as far as knowledge. He was born in the late 1800s. He was born in the horse and buggy days. He lived through the day and age of the advent of the automobile. And of course, as far as communication, radio, and then television. You and I have lived through the information age. We've seen an explosion as far as technology. We have these little gadgets we carry around with us, and they're just little mini computers. And we have so much knowledge that is right there at our fingertips. Well, verse 5. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, there stood other two. He's seeing a couple of other angels in his vision. The one on this side of the bank of the river, and the other on that side of the bank of the river. And one said to the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, how long shall it be to the end of these wonders? And I heard the man clothed in linen, who was upon the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and left hand unto heaven, and swore by him that lives forever, that it shall be for a time, times and a half. There's that phrase again. We've looked at it before, but a time is used in the Bible to represent a year. When it says times, plural, generally it means the first multiple. So a year, 2 more years, and a half a year, 3.5 years, 42 months, 1,260 days. We have a number of things that are fulfilled. We have the treading down of Jerusalem, the treading down by the Gentiles, 3.5 years. Arising of the final beast, 42 months of the beast. 3.5 years the work of the 2 witnesses. 3.5 years of national downfall and captivity to Israel. The children of Israel, I should say, not just the country of. So we have a lot of things that take place in that final. So it says here, and when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. And so there is a scattering of the power. There comes a time when the work of the church, when the proclaiming of the gospel is stopped. It can't happen anymore until Christ returns. The prophet Amos spoke of a famine of the word of God. So, verse 8, and I heard, but I understood not. And I said, oh my Lord, what shall the end of these things? What shall be the end of these things? And he said, go your way, Daniel, for your words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end. The time of the end. So Daniel was given some heavy burdens to write down, some heavy burdens to carry. And we all have inquiring minds. We want to understand more. But he was told, seal it, close it. It's not for now. You're just the instrument to write it down. It's for the time of the end. Now, John, when he was given his, he was told that it is for the time. So it was not sealed. Well, as we've gotten further along and the prophetic framework has been taking place step by step, the time came when we began to be able, students of the Bible began to be able to piece certain things together and come to see what has been laid out here by Daniel. Verse 10, many shall be purified and made white and tried. Again, looking across the ages, all the way from the beginning with Abel, all the way across 6,000 years, we have the people of God who have been tried and tested, and in the process are purified and made into finely honed tools for God's service. But the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. Notice verse 11. We have some other numbers that are added in here. And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away. So we have this forerunner, Antiochus Epiphanes, stopping the sacrifices, the morning and the evening sacrifices. And then it was restored. That'll happen again. It will be stopped. And the abomination that maketh desolate set up. So there will be a religious power moving his headquarters to Jerusalem, seeking worship as though he was God. And he's not God. He's not the true God. He may be the pawn of a God, the God of this world. Then it says, there shall be 1,290 days. Okay, 3.5 years is 1,260 days. Here we have 1,290 days, so 30 more. Blessed is he that waits and comes to the 1,335 days. So here we have 1,335. Verse 13, but go you your way till the end be. Daniel is told, go on with your life as much as you're given, for you shall rest. So Daniel's being told, time's going to go on. You're going to die. You're going to sleep in your grave. You shall rest and stand in your lot at the end of days. And actually, we use the word resurrection or to resurrect. The word actually broken down means to stand again from below. So to be raised back up to life. So Daniel is told, this isn't for you. You're going to die, sleep in your grave. You'll come back up. You'll be among the wise who understand, and you'll shine as the firmament. Now, I want to pull up something else here online. Bear with me. Okay, this is from the Bible commentary, the part on Daniel 12. And I thought it would be of help here just to look at what is mentioned here. In verse 11, where we just read, it adds the 1290, and then the next verse, the 1335. Just if you can see my cursor right here, we'll pick it up there. The key to understanding appears to be verse 13, where Daniel is told that he will rise to his inheritance at the end of the days. Hold on here. I'm not sure I have that up on the screen where you can see it. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and read. I'm not sure if I'm projecting this. Daniel's told he'll rise to his inheritance at the end of the days. This seems to mean that the end of the various groupings of days mentioned. That is, the 1260 days, the 1290 days, and the 1335 days all seem to end at the time Daniel is resurrected at Christ's return. So a possible scenario is that the breaking of the power of the saints, meaning the cutting off of any public proclamation, will come 1335 days before Christ's return. Then 45 days after that, 1290 days before Christ's return, the abomination of desolation will be set up. And then 30 days later, 1260 days before Christ's return, the Great Tribulation will commence. Thankfully, Christ will return in just 3.5 years from this point to bring deliverance to the people of Israel and Judah, and as the commencement of his deliverance of all mankind and everlasting life to his saints. The dead in Christ will rise again. So, that pretty much wraps it up. That brings us to the end of the book of Daniel. I've enjoyed it. I hope you have as well. There is a lot of material in our booklets, such as Middle Eastern Bible prophecy. And of course, it leads into other areas, such as the book of Revelation. We have the book of Revelation Unveiled. We have the Bible commentary that covers so much. There's a wealth of material out there that you can follow up on as you so desire, as you are interested in. So we will conclude the Bible study series with this, and God bless all of you. Take care and have a wonderful week and a good Sabbath ahead.